We started a series Wednesday looking back at the search that landed Baylor, Mack Rhoades at Baylor. We've heard from different angles. And now we go to the motherlode. Bob Beaudine, president and CEO of Eastman and Beaudine, also a search firm, part of a search firm that has hired numerous administrators and coaches. In fact, he was at the Louisiana Tech win against North Texas and was the one that landed those two head coaches at La Tech and Grant McCasland at North Texas. Bob, Mr. Beaudine, great to have you on. It's an honor. How you doing, sir?
Man, fantastic, David. I really enjoyed being on your show, and congratulations on all you guys are doing.
Thank you very, very much. So when did Mack Rhoades come on the radar? I know that they needed to make this one right. It seemed like it happened pretty quickly. Can you kind of give us a little bit of background on that?
So I've known Mack Rhoades back before because I placed him twice in his career. I started to get to know Mack back when he was at UTEP, and I placed him at Akron. So I had a chance back then. And so I don't know if you want to start there or you want to start up more recent. You got your choice.
Yeah, okay, when Baylor's job became available, when all of that was going on with the transition, was he someone that you contacted immediately as the search firm, or was he the first choice? As Dr. Garland said, after you met with him, it seemed like that was what Baylor wanted to do.
Yeah. So, when in my business, I've now done this like for 42 years. So Mack and I have been friends for, back since 2003. And so I got a chance to watch him as he grew, got a chance to place him there, which, at Akron, and then I've always stayed in touch in this whole process. So he was the main focus all along, 100%. So he's the perfect fit and so I had to, going in and talking to someone like Mack, who had been a year and a half at Mizzou. Now that's a little complicating,
yeah.
in a process, because there was a lot going on at Mizzou at the time. And so I had a lot going on, obviously at Baylor, and had a huge opportunity to do things going back as far as Scott Drew. And so I was used to understanding how to vision cast something. And because I knew Mack so well, and I knew Mack's faith, and I knew that Mack's from Texas, and I knew that, it was, he would love to come back, and this would be an opportunity of a lifetime. He could share his faith in Texas, and he couldn't do that at Mizzou. And there's also, when you're an athletic director, as you know, you got to deal with a board, and his board at Mizzou is a little complicated because they're called a board of curators. And when you're dealing with curators, those are not necessarily Mizzou grads. These are people like city council people. And so, they can just hit you from anything on any various side. And so I was going to have to create a process and a plan to go out and get Mack to first look at this job. And to do that, you have what we do differently at Eastman and Beaudine. I worked for my dad for 20 years. My dad started the executive search industry. So we're more consultants, and we spend time trying to, if we want to err on the side of our candidate, not our client, because if it's not good for Mack, I don't want it. It wouldn't be good for Baylor. And so, we do everything, and all our leadership and all our style is personal, because we're friends to start with, and I know him. So I had to first kind of start and say, okay, so I've got this opportunity and, you're the perfect guy. And so we started to chat a little bit about that, started to talk about what the opportunity could be and where he could do it. And, being a strong Christian firm myself, in this, what I do is, a man without a vision perishes. And so we set a vision for him, and he was extremely excited.
Bob, when you set up something, because people can make a list of good coaches, good athletic directors, and just try to go down the list and call people and be like, well, he's good, he's won here. But when you try to find a fit for someone, do you have is there a flow chart? What's your organizational process when you try to find these factors in this, not just saying, well, this guy's been good here, so he can be good anywhere, because as you know, that's not necessarily the case.
So when we look, David, we start out with a process is that what would the best candidate want in a job rather than a job description? So if I'm going to try to get you to do something you're not going to do, there's 5 things that we look at. so that I can sit and consult with you and the candidate, and we can sit and talk about these 5, and we evaluate them together against what they're currently doing. And so when I first started with Mack, I said, so let's review the 5, right? And number 1 is you want to go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And so that's a big thing today for a thing. So what that means is then you have to be able to talk about Dr. Garland. You got to talk about, Cheryl Gotches. You got to talk about what's happening at Baylor. Be able to talk about all the things and then say, here's our issues and this aspect. And then, how are you being celebrated where you are? Number 2 is I'm going to talk about tools. And so, specific tools that Baylor would have for him versus the other. But when I talk about these 5, there's a mirror, right? My client wants to be celebrated, and they want Mack to be able to have had experience and tools that could come in and do something for Baylor that needed to be done today. And what is that? Mack has elite skills in interpersonal skills, and so he creates an atmosphere of that, like, come join us. And so when the first time you meet Mack, I mean, I'll never forget back when, and I'll come back to my 5, but the first time I ever met Mack, he, when we put him up for Akron, when he came into the room, and we had a large committee at the time, he walked around the room and spent time with each person. He didn't just shake their hand and move on, right? And people in Waco, they want someone they could really think is genuine, who's intentional about it, but they want them to have skills in aspects of not seeing trouble as trouble, but seeing it as a kind of an opportunity in disguise. And he has that ability to kind of look at it as a springboard to better things because he's so organized, he's so thorough. And so knowing somebody, so in the years that you spend time with him, I sat on the board of I put him the head of all Division I athletic directors. So we spend time, and these candidates, all these people come to our office, we sit and talk, we look at their background, we look at their skills. So it's not like, hey, I got a yellow pages. I mean, you got to look and say, what is my client looking? So great candidates want to go where they're celebrated. They want tools, and they want it to be good for their family, right? And so coming from Texas, I knew this would be a better thing for him. Coming from the fact that he'd want to go to a Christian school and really spend his career and do that would be really good. Knowing, as I did, not only Dr. Garland, and now, which is elite because, Linda's so fantastic at her skills and her ability to do things. And then that made it his ability to deal with a president. I've watched him, right? So one of my best friends was the number 2 person at Akron. So I watched his skills and his ability to do that. I knew his athletic director and who he had, Bob Stull at UTEP. And Bob was a former coach at Mizzou. When they went to UTEP, they had already been, when Bob got there, they had NCAA violations. They had trouble. And when he brought Mack in, that's what they were dealing with, right? And they turned it totally around. And so they built up stadiums. They raised money. A job today and all of this is just fantastic in that. And so a good candidate wants to create a legacy. So I like people who see past the trouble to see, hey, I'm able to hire great coaches. I'm able to hire great staff. I mean, look at the staff and coaches that he has. I mean, he's just done a beautiful job with Jeremiah and Joe Vaughn and Marcus and he did with Doug McNamee. Now with Kevin Gall. I mean, he's elite in creating an atmosphere of great team. And so last is I wanted to give an opportunity for him to do better in money where he was. And so I had all 5. I don't think people should ding out on any of these, David. I mean, that's the key is you're supposed to do a job you love with people you love in a place you love where your family loves. You get to do it for the right reasons.
Bob, you brought up the faith aspect a couple of times, and I know that's been something that's been important to Mack is to be able to openly celebrate his faith. I know for Dave Aranda, that's been another draw for him and for other coaches as well. How important was that on the Baylor side of things in terms of who they were looking for, and just how important was that for someone like a Mack Rhoades and others perhaps who come to a school like Baylor where, it's not the necessarily most widely loved or celebrated thing about the school, but for the people who are Christian or people of faith, it is very important to them.
I mean, if you look at the type of people that we have, faith was number 1. It's always faith. It's always based on family. It's always based on some facet of not shying away from trouble, but being able to turn it into something great. It's a catalyst. So if you take guys like Scott Drew and Jason Cook and Jim Grobe and Matt Rule and Brett Dalton and Dave Aranda, all of them, the very first thing that they would turn to me and I would be able to sell is their faith, right? I mean, today you get canceled for talking about your faith. You get squashed into a point, and you lose your unique ability to share with student athletes who are in trouble. The issue today with is that you can't just do a job you like. You can't ever be successful at what you like. So the only way you can be successful is if you love it. And of course, if I can start with the fact that I don't necessarily have all the answers. There's a limitation to Bob. There's a limitation to Mack, but there isn't when all of a sudden I can start to share God and I can start to share something that we can be overcomers. And of course, no one's better than that than Baylor.
Bob Beaudine, President, CEO, Eastman and Beaudine, obviously the search firm, speaker, author, much more, a part of the search, involved in the search with Mack Rhoades, Scott Drew even, and what, of course, has come of that as well. Craig Smoke, David Smoke, and Paul Catalina with us on Sic'Em 365 Radio. How much with what you said about UTEP dealing with NCAA stuff, and then what he had to deal with the short time at Missouri, which there was a mess there, did that prepare him, Bob, for what was going on at Baylor?
Oh, 100%. I mean, and even going to a school that didn't have good budgets and didn't have, troubled in all that Akron had, each of the spots coming into Houston, learning all the aspects of having to turn around a program and then all of a sudden having tough, major aspects of understanding, how I'm going to relate up. See, one of the things I want to just talk a second about Mack, which is again, it's an elite skill of someone, if I can find it, you can manage up and then you can manage down and you can manage with your peers. And so he likes doing all of those. He treats people the way you like to be treated. I mean, when you're with him, he has kind of Ronald Reagan skills where he can put his arm around you and tell you a story and do it in a way that you feel personal. It's personal with you. And it is. I mean, I've known him for all these years. And, he sees you in a crowd. He'll give you a look. He'll wave to you. Where other people, they're concerned about this. Those skills are crucial in a town like Waco, in my opinion, because Waco has such a great community of people. It's small and yet it's thriving now with Chip and Joanna and all the things that are going around and all the growth that's happening in Texas, where everybody in New York and everyone in California and everywhere else want to move here. But it's so great to have someone who's so organized. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, I laugh at, if you know Mack, he's thorough. When you go to an interview with him, he's thorough. But I like it in the way as why, because look at his results. I mean, he's slow enough to listen to the candidates. He's able to really evaluate something. And so the key in a search, one of the things that I like, I mean, when I was doing the search, I was finishing a book I wrote called Two Chairs, and which has been, one chair for you, one for God, you meet him in the morning. And so what I try to do to see about fit is to see how you're going to respond to all of a sudden a book that's requiring you, hey, does God know your situation? Is it too hard for him? Would you actually meet him in the morning, first thing? And the answer is, Mack, one of the things that when we put in Nikki Collins in this whole process and who's doing so unbelievable, in my opinion, has had one of the greatest, ability to follow a legend and has done so unbelievable this year. When you talk about her, the very first thing he says in his opening is, hey, I just thank God, and I've done Two Chairs, and I had done this, and I'm talking to God. When I was talking to Dave Aranda, talking him into it, I mean, he was going to look at another opportunity, and he still had to go and look at potentially Oregon and Phil Knight and all the stuff that was going around it. And I said, hey, this is fantastic. Why? And I said, well, first, I want you to spend time at Two Chairs with you and your wife, and he's a man of faith. And so all of these pieces of a pie in a process is what makes people come alive to you, right, in a meeting. And he's really good at that.
Bob, this is Paul Catalina. When you placed Mack, though, it's not a situation and this team's coach left and they want to hire a good one and find that fit. You were telling your client and a friend of yours, I am going to put you on a helicopter and drop you in a ship in the middle of a hurricane, because that's what was going on here. How delicate it is to navigate that particular situation.
Well, having done it, I mean, I don't think it could be anything more so in my life, because people hire us because they know we really like. I tell people, they said, "What job should I give you?" And I said, "Give me your worst." Right, and because it just gives a chance, for God to shine. And so when I did Scott Drew, I mean, could that be any worse?
Yeah.
And so, but Scott and I talked the very first night about winning a national championship. And we talked the very first night. I was pacing it back in front of my house. When I talked to Mack, he had already faced a number of times at UTEP and Houston and Akron. And he was in the midst of a big crisis where they were on campus at Mizzou. And so one of the things is, he wasn't shying away from it. I just told him that, listen, if I had the right people, the right challenge, the right opportunity, the right growth, the right money, and my question is, and he and I have a lot in common, because first off, he's got a fantastic wife, Amy, and he has 3 daughters like I have. And I said, would you, this would be the end of your career. And so he never, ever was worried about coming into that environment, ever. I mean, he looked at it, and when he sat with our committee, and we had just a great committee with Dr. Garland. I know you had him on, and I mean, holy cow, I just love him. And so, but we had Robin Driscoll, and we had, Dan Horde, and we had, I think you have the best HR person, Cheryl Gotchers, in the world. And so when we sat in that room, everyone, there's people when they walk into a room, and they carry this personal environment. And you walk in, you can't see energy, but you sure know when it enters the room. Mm-hmm. And when he walks in, and you can tell who's going to win the job in the first 5 minutes. And he had us already laughing. He already had us in. He has skills because he already knows everything about everybody else. I mean, one of my guys in my neighborhood that I loved and grew up around was Zig Ziglar. And Zig used to say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. And so I'm always thinking, I wrote a book called The Power of Who. It's about the people who matter most. And he understands the who were those candidates, those people in the room. And he was making everyone in the room feel that they were going to be part of his team, and that he needed them, and he wanted to be onboarded right, and that this would have to be great for everybody in the family. And so by the time you finished, I mean, dang it, they wanted to cheer. I mean, I didn't let them leave the room. I put them into a green room for a second, went back in. They said, okay, hold a second. We got to get him. I mean, do not let him leave the premises. And so we stopped, talked about this. We made him an offer, and he accepted right there on the spot. Yeah, it was a good offer.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Garland said that they didn't want to leave wherever you were at the time. Now, you're pretty good, aren't you guys? Pretty much stealth-like at where you meet people. Sometimes you have to be, right?
All the time.
Yeah,
we do it all the time. So my business is like you're part of the CIA. I mean, you can't. No one knows it. I mean, no one knows who I am. No one knows what I look like usually. I mean, I try to stay behind the scene. I don't go to news conferences. I don't do all this. All my competitors, they're out there. I mean, I'm not trying to do this because my job is to get usually the 4 best people in the country into the room so you can make your choice. Here, I was so confident, okay, having done 14 assignments for Baylor, having done all these things, et cetera, for them, having turned it, that I said to them, listen, you're going to know as soon as you do. I mean, he has a demonstrated record of achievement of every category area that Baylor wanted to do, from fundraising to marketing to dealing with trouble to fantastic ability to get along with coaches and build coaches and hire coaches. I mean, he had just done spectacular things at Houston. He was doing great things at Mizzou. He wasn't running anything from Mizzou. I was trying to steal him from there. I tell CEOs when I give talks around the country is that the number one skill today, if you're a CEO, is retention, okay, and recruitment. And of course, I tell them all the time, I said, so what you really want a speech from is a person who knows how to steal all your people. and so my aspect is that he's great at it. No one left except to take a bigger job. I mean, they'd all go to him, to Mack, and say, hey, what should I do? Why? Because first off, as you know him, you guys know him. He's funny. Yeah. He's fun. he doesn't, he always first, he's never going to let me, if I talk to him, he's never going to start out with not saying to me, Bob, how's Cheryl? How are the girls? What are you doing? He doesn't start out with business. He's not about the deal. He's about the relationship. And that's why he's elite. That's why he's somebody that Baylor never wants to lose as an athletic director. And that's why everybody else in the country, has moved people back and forth and everything, et cetera. But they just don't do that here. So one of the fun parts is you have to keep it quiet. If anybody could find out. And so I build my reputation on confidentiality. And so I build my time on getting to know people so they trust me and they won't see their name leaked. And so that takes a lot of skill. And most universities, they don't spend enough time. And that's when I do. I try to work directly with presidents to say, we need a small committee. And I need to make sure everybody understands that if ever Mack's name was leaked, I mean, that would be like, with your home school, that'd be like you're cheating on your mate. And he wasn't doing any of that. He was looking because he so knew me and so knew the value and the opportunity at Baylor. Because it wasn't like something, having been in Texas, it's the school, it's nationally the school from a Christian perspective that you've got to take a strong look at because it's in the Big 12 and it's doing things and it's a leader. And you want your kids to go there. My daughter went to Baylor. I just love Baylor. So it's an easy sell for me.
Were you involved in the Rule and Aranda, or one or the other, or both?
Both, and Grove before.
Okay, and Jim Grove, I want to ask you about the Matt Rule. When you guys met with him, wherever that was, at some secretive place, is it true that you mentioned he was going to meet with Oregon, and somebody brought up, that's great because you're going to meet Phil Knight, but you guys knew ahead of time that Phil Knight was not going to be at that meeting?
I knew he was that the situation was that Phil Knight was on a plane with Chip Kelly and Dave Dunn, the big agent, and they were off going to a funeral. And so I didn't know if Phil Knight would not go to that, although he's best friends with Chip and he had all the situation. But the odds were he wasn't going to be there. And they hadn't really had a chance to really get prepared in their search like we did. I mean, we were already prepared. We had everybody in the room. We were in full mode. One of the great parts is once you know who your candidate is that you really love, and Mack Rhoades he rocked. It's just so many different things. I could spend an hour talking about how fantastic Dave Aranda is.
Oh yeah. Well, we're going to follow up with that one.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable, and how we set up a special place when we met Dave Aranda, and we first brought in his wife first, and she got to talk to the whole committee, so we got her to feel comfortable. That's just a typical Mack Rhoades concept that starts and says, hey, I'm going to make him feel good, right? And wouldn't this be good? And it was. She's just spectacular. And so he's so thorough and all of that kind of stuff. So, I got to give credit really a lot of things. So when I met Jim Grove 7 years before I had done it, and he was at Wake, and he was introducing me one of his assistants, right? And he wanted help there because he was there. And I turned to him at the end of the meeting. I go, wow, I knew you, Jimmy, but I didn't know you like this. And I said, I'm going to place you one time again before you finish. He goes, oh no, I'm going to finish right here. This is where it's going to be. And I said, okay. I said, but I'm just telling you, I'm going to do it one more time before you're done. And so he retires and all of that from that. So I call him I call him one day and I said, hey Jim, where are you? And he goes, I'm on the beach. And I go, really? Fantastic. I said, so what are you doing? He says, I'm about to go on a cruise with my wife. And I said, well, maybe not. And I said, I think I might have something, and it could be really good. It could pay for your grandkids for a little bit more time.
Wow. That's awesome.
And when we talked about it, I just said to him, could you imagine doing something this good? And so is there a finer man than Jim Grove?
No.
Oh, my gosh.
No.
As to go through what he did and what he did, I don't know. He should win. He was just able and should have been given awards.
Yeah,
because he's just so spectacular. And he was the most supportive. He told me when he finished, he goes, you know what? that 6 months, that whole period of time, Bob, he said, I want to tell you, for the rest of my life, I'm a Baylor Bear.
Yep. Wow. And he has.
And that he said, the way they treated me, the way the town treated me, the way the administration treated me, he became best friends with Mack. And he'd do anything for Baylor. He calls me all the time. Groby does. he's just spectacular. I love him.
Yeah, we're big Groby fans here as well. Bob, I know you got to run soon, but I do want to ask you about Dave Aranda. You mentioned a little bit there as far as how that process got, but just how unique of a guy is he? Just how special of a coach is he in terms of the people that you've dealt with over the years?
So I don't think I've ever met anybody who came as prepared as he did. I mean, I remember Kevin Gall and I were sitting watching some film of him winning the national championship. And they have this film of him walking out after they win. All the people are over here cheering and doing all this. And, of course, his defense, stopped Clemson. I mean, he was doing all that. And he walks out into the middle, of the field. And you can watch him. He takes this big, deep breath. And then he turns around and he starts our search. And that was it. And within a day, we were on him. We already talked to him. We already had him prepared. We had set up a place where we were going to have the house. And so when he came in, we had his wife. It was unbelievable. But when he sat down, and when you start talking about, hey, so tell me about, let's just talk staffing for a second. And so he has this laminated sheet, with every coach and 3 deep in every single area of all the coaches that he would have and who he was going to get.
Laminated doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
No, of course. But he'd bring in philosophy. He'd bring in history while he talks. He has this special way he coaches kids where he tests them on how they are, whether they can hear, how they learn, right? How do they, if I give you a play, would you learn best from the playbook? Would you look visually? How could I get best? And he tests every one of his players. And so we started to talk about how he does life with his team and his whole thing. And what you start to feel is, dang it, I just want to go over and hug the guy. I want him to be my son's coach. And when you start to listen to his faith, you start to listen to how he treats people, and you look at his face, the determination that he's going to be in. I mean, there was no surprise. I mean, the first year he's in the midst of a dang pandemic. Mm-hmm. Second year he wins the Sugar Bowl.
Yep.
I mean, and so there was no one in our committee, as in zero. I mean, in all of this, we all looked at the end of the first year, and then everyone's like, we said, okay, we're high-fiving because he's about to do something that no one's ever done before in just his second year. And everybody should probably, I mean, my goodness, one of the things that you love about people when you can place them is that they're not only just great at what they do, but they're great people. I mean, and they, I always look, my dad always kind of did this, is that people matter most. Our heart knows that God taught us, and yet somehow we've forgotten. And so Dave Aranda hasn't, Scott Drew hasn't, Nikki hasn't. I mean, we start to go through the staff that all of a sudden, that Mack has put together. When you start to look at Linda and all the people around you start talking about some of the facets of now having, me talking with Jay Allison or all of a sudden having, people that we've had a chance to do with Larry Hurd. I mean, the list of Paul Foster. My gosh. I mean, it's just crazy. And we go back to Drayton and David Brooks and Jim Turner and Ron Murph and Reagan Ramsauer. I mean, so the list of people, it's really interesting, but all of these people, people ask us all the time, so what's the one thing that's going to get a job? And so, I always get a kick, is we did a study when we did a thing for a bunch of women coaches who were coming in from a group to ask us that question. What's the one way I'm going to get the job? And it's never one thing, right? It's kind of this word, Kevin had thought about it called monocausality. And so there's 150 things that have to be good. And so all the people that we had are just not just somewhat good for this job. I mean, they're the best in class. I mean, they could be anywhere in the country, and you know where they want to be? Baylor.
Yeah. No, and they want to be here a while, a long time. I know Matt had his other goals as well. Bob, I got to wrap it up with this. When you and Scott Drew are in the same room together, is that like almost like the world might explode with the energy that you two have?
I mean, you always love this. So Scott, early in his time, he would call me on he'd be recruiting. He's got 45 minutes left. He spent his whole day, juicing. He goes, okay, I got 45 minutes to get home. It's 10:30 at night. Tell Cheryl you got to go in the other room because you're going to have to give me some.
Yeah.
You're going to have to juice me. And then we do it. And so between the two of us, and of course I have brother Bryce at Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. And so, and Homer's could be again, when you work with your dad, when people work with their dads and sons and this whole process, it's just a blessing when you have other people who do it. And so I think energy kind of begets energy. And so when I'm with him, I don't like Scott Drew. I love it.
Yeah. Kevin Gall, you mentioned Kevin. I know he's spoken incredibly highly of you. Obviously, Cheryl Gotchis was, because it's a personnel thing, wasn't going to be able to come on and share her side of this as well, but so many people were involved. When you were called the most influential man in sports that you've never heard of by Sports Illustrated, what did that mean to you?
To me, that's so fantastic. I want God to get all the glory. All my success is because of him and two chairs, spending time having a personal conversation. I get a minute to talk. He gets 4, but I tell you what, you got someone really special with Kevin Gall there. He's smart, strategic. Mm-hmm. He loves people. And so he's going to do great and mighty things there as well.
Bob, thank you very much, man. It's great to have you on. We could talk for a long, long time, and maybe again very soon, as we wanted to get through it, as all the success Baylor's having, to go back and look at the search that landed. It didn't take long to land what Mack Rhoades has done. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
You too. Bob Beaudine, President, CEO, Eastman and Beaudine. And I'm telling you right now, here are some of the things he's been part of senior leadership with: NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, NHL franchises, league offices, PGA Tour, U.S. Tennis Association, Bull Riding Association, U.S. Olympics, NASCAR, and UFC. That's just some of what he's done. When we come back, the Lady Bears,